Hello everybody and welcome back to The Favorite Comics, and this week we are headed into the world of Marvel, and we are talking about the most influential and most important comic book of all time, question mark? You could argue it is. I'd say it is. It is the first run of Fantastic Four by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Now, I'm a huge fan of both of these creators. I really like Jack Kirby. I think he's a very big part of why the comic industry was able to get as far ahead as it did. I do think he contributed a lot to the success of this comic book and of the other stuff at Marvel Comics. I think he did a lot for DC and a lot for Marvel at the same time. I also really like Stan Lee. Now, I'm not as big a fan of Stan Lee as some people are. I enjoy his work, but I do think a lot of it comes down to Jack when it comes to like those earlier stuff in Marvel, but that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to talk about their work on the Fantastic Four. Now, the Fantastic Four, if you guys haven't seen my Geek Wave episode talking about it, I love these guys. They are some of my favorite characters of all time in all of comic books because they are a family, and that's what I love about this original run is you really feel that sense of family and camaraderie between them all because they're still like young and in development, but there's a real sense of like community there. You know, you see they're not like technically family, but you see the friendship built up between Reed and Ben and how that interacts with each other. You see the relationship between Reed and Sue and how that forms into like a life-lasting bond, and it's really cool to see how that grows and how they become these two people who love each other. You see the relationship between Sue and Johnny, and it's something that's really interesting to see, like a brother and a sister like done in this way where there's like a sense of, hey, Johnny, get your head out of your ass and actually stay focused and get together. I love the way that Sue is written in these earlier books. I think she becomes a better character later on though, but I just think there's something really cool about her. Like, hey, she's the motherly figure who's trying to keep everybody together in this world, and even if that means that she isn't really seen or heard, she's doing her best to keep it together. I think that's really cool. There's also like a huge sense in these earlier books of like, these are not powers you want to have. They don't make your life better and you don't really get anything from it. Like, I think the best example of that is from, was it issue 51, I believe, where it's this man and this monster, where it's Ben Grimm like, I'm this creature who everybody looks at and fears me. How can I ever love myself truly? And I love that idea. It's like, yeah, you could become this monster, but that doesn't mean you are going to be loved and respected, even if you are a hero. I think that's really cool. It's just such a fascinating and different angle that we haven't really seen in comic books at the time, because even in the 60s, we're coming out of like the weird campy era of the 50s where not a lot of things really happened or matured, but now it's like, hey, these are real adult characters who have real problems. Susan and Reed's relationship isn't this like clear-cut thing like Lois and Clark is, and as much as I love those characters, Reed and Sue feels more realistic. It's like, I can't be seen by the man I love and he keeps ignoring me for his science. Or Johnny being this hothead who's always getting in fights with everybody. I think that's a really cool and interesting thing that we've seen. This series really brought us into the modern age of comic books. We don't have the MCU without it. We don't have Spider-Man without it. We don't have any of these like modern ideas of storytelling for these characters without it, because it really just gave us this sense of there is some real tragedy in these characters that we should explore and get in depth into. And I think that's a really cool idea that we haven't really seen in comic books up until that point. It all starts with this book. It all starts with everything that we've seen in the pages of this original run. I think that is fantastic. There's just so many cool ideas presented in that book, and it's just really impressive to see how that all comes into play and what that means for each and every character. Right? Come on, like, how can in the 60s we tell a story about like these characters when we haven't really experienced like these real dramatic personal stuff? This is the first big win for Marvel, and it's the like coolest win for Marvel too. And let's just go over a little bit of like the characters it introduces into the larger Marvel universe, because like I said, I have talked about this before in other mediums, but saying it here, I'm just kind of like recapping all this stuff. So let's get more into depth on some of the other characters. So we know about the Fantastic Four. It introduces us to Dr. Doom, who's like the coolest villain in all of Marvel history. He is this really maniacal, complex guy who's more about vanity and control and having everything under his own ambitions and want than he is this like maniacal, creepy ruler of a world that's going to destroy everyone. He's more like, I'm going to control it and then everything will be okay. I love that a lot. One of the other things I really love about this original run is it sets up everyone's desire to want Susan Storm as a potential love interest. Victor Von Doom loves her, the Submariner wants her. It's like, that's such a cool idea that this motherly figure who isn't presented in this sexual manner. And I'm even kind of in like the vein that Wonder Woman's kind of more sexual than her. But Susan Storm is just like this motherly figure who's protecting her family, and like the king of Atlantis and the king of a sovereign nation are like, I want her to want me, you know? that is such a cool thing, I think, that we see in this story. It's amazing. We're introduced to the Inhumans, which are a big part of Marvel lore going forward, which is kind of impressive that we actually get that. Isn't that weird? We get the Inhumans, that's kind of cool. We also get Black Panther, who's become an influential figure onto his own right. That's really amazing to see. And an incredibly complex character that has just made his debut here. Again, we get Galactus and Silver Surfer, two big figureheads in the Marvel Cosmic Universe still. And that's really amazing that in this book, in this simple book that these two guys wrote, because they're like, if we're going out, if Marvel is going to lose money, which at this time they were, and they really wanted to like rebrand themselves as bigger and better storytelling, you have Stan Lee who's like, well, I'm going to go out on top and tell the story I want to tell. And that just happens to be the story of me and my wife. Because, come on, Reed and Sue are just Stan and Joan Lee. They are. Everybody knows it. We can all tell, like, Stan Lee put himself into the character of Reed Richards. And that's why I think earlier Reed Richards has this, like, really interesting, complex, godlike complex. And I wouldn't say godlike in, like, a negative way. It's just, like, he's just right all the time. He gets everything done, and it's really cool to see that, interestingly, too. But the one thing he can't really do is save his friend Ben from his condition. And you're like, oh, that's really interesting. Now, is Ben supposed to be a Jack Kirby kind of thing, where Stan's always the intellectual, smarter guy? I don't know. That could be its own thing and an own conversation to have on itself. But I really encourage people, especially if you are coming into this and you're like, man, these characters are going to be making their appearance in the MCU. I cannot wait to see them. They're going to be so fun. I encourage you, go back and read these earlier issues of the Fantastic Four. It's going to tell you a lot of things about what made Marvel possible. Because you can see from these earlier issues everything that Marvel comes to be. You don't get Daredevil or Spider-Man or the X-Men or the Hulk without the template being set with these original stories from the Fantastic Four. You don't get the Hulk without the Thing. You don't get Peter Parker without the dichotomy of Johnny Storm. You don't get Reed Richards being the smartest guy in the universe, and then you have Iron Man come in being like a brash, arrogant asshole about that kind of style. All of these people that you love in the MCU, they all come back to what we saw in these earlier issues of the Fantastic Four, and it's really cool to see that. It's like bringing comic books into a more mature setting, and that is something we haven't seen up until that point. So I really just impressed with the storytelling nature of these guys and what they did here. I would argue that this is Stan Lee's best work. Now you could say it's Spider-Man, which I would not disagree with you on either. But just being like, yeah, if we're gonna make a comic book, we're going to go all out and make it realistic. We're not going to do like your over-the-top godlike heroes like DC Comics did. These are going to be people that could live in your backyard. That's why, like, Ben Grimm's from Yancey Street. That's why they live in New York. They have a building. They live in a building. There's other people in the building with them. You know, they're like these actual celebrities, and you get that really interesting feeling, and it's something that's really cool to see. I really like that a lot. And like I said, this sets up my love of Susan Storm, because I am an unapologetic Susan Storm fan. I've said it numerous times, and I will continue to say it. She is the linchpin to everything that works in the Marvel Universe. If you like anything about these characters, it's because Susan Storm, especially in some of these earlier issues, she was like, yeah, I'm cool. I don't have to present myself in a way that's over the top or dramatic. I'm just going to sit back, let the guys do their thing, and I'm going to reel them in when they get a little too crazy. I love that effect of her, and later on she'd become one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. Like, that is such a fun and interesting thing to see. I love having that respect for this character and that woman. It's really fun, and it makes me so happy that she had those moments. I absolutely adore it. I love it. I'm impressed by it every time I see it. I think it's really fun and really cool. There's so much about these earlier stories to love, apart from the fact, you're getting everything you love about comic books in it. They're just great individual stories that aren't these over-the-top, like, think pieces. And sometimes they can get a little too cosmic for their own good. I think things like The Ultimate Nullifier is a great example of, like, this is a cool idea, let's see how this goes. But at the same time, there's, like, a groundedness to the stories. Like, they're not these over-the-top godlike characters. They could be anybody. They're just like a family hanging out and having fun. They are the first family of comic books, and they are the most influential characters in all of comic book history, if you want my honest opinion. Maybe except for Superman, but that's another conversation we will get back to. I love these characters. There's something so cool about this original run that sets it apart from everything else before it. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they are two guys who defined an industry. They made it something of their own, and we should cheer and cherish them and just applaud the work that they've done in this industry to make it possible. Like, it's incredible. These guys really just set everything apart. They built Marvel Comics off of this character and this concept, and what a cool thing is that we have is that we could see it. We can see what they made from these guys. So I highly recommend anybody out there who hasn't read these original Fantastic Four books from Lee and Kirby, go out there and check it out. I can guarantee you there will be something you like in them. You'll get your first appearance of maybe some of your favorite characters in all of comic books. It's going to be something you thoroughly enjoy, and it's going to be something that defined an entire generation of writers and artists and storytelling. So that is why Fantastic Four Volume 1 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby is one of my favorite comics. Now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, give us a rating. I'd love to see what you guys do on there. And it just gives the channel and this podcast a little more to do. So as I said, thank you guys for watching. You can check me out on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, all that good stuff. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.